Welcome back, guys. So today's episode of Beginner's Guide to Growing Chili Peppers from Seed to Source, we're going to talk about feeding your plants. So your plants should be around about 6 weeks old now, or at least have their first or second true leaves. And they're getting to the point where the nutrients in the compost that you've been growing them in is going to start running out, and they're going to need to have some supplements. So if you want to optimize the growth of your chili peppers, you're going to have to supplement some nutrients. So when we talk about fertilizer, we talk about NPK. So what is NPK? Basically, it's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Now, all plants need these nutrients to be able to grow. Some need more than others of each of the different parts, but essentially you need to have a good balance between all of these. Nitrogen is used to help with the green leafy growth. Phosphorus is largely responsible for root growth and the flowering and fruiting of the plants. So more important towards the back end of growing your chili peppers. So when you're getting ready to start getting some flowers. Potassium is a nutrient that helps the plant function properly. So to help it with things like photosynthesis and absorption of nutrients and absorption of water, that sort of thing. It helps with all that. So it's just the general functioning of the plant. At this stage of their growth, where they're still quite small and you haven't yet put them outside in their big pots, you're going to just need a very small amount of nutrients to add to the plants when you water them. Now, I'm going to go through a few of the nutrients that I use, but we'll start off on the ones that you should be using right now to keep your plants healthy. Your plants will tell you when they have a deficiency or when they have a problem. The leaves will curl up, or for example, they might go yellow. They might lose that deep green that you're expecting. Now, that could be for a few reasons. It could be overwatering, and at this stage it could also mean that they are starting to require more nutrients. At this stage of growth, when the plants are still young, what I use is a seaweed fertilizer. So this is the one I've been using for the last few years. I have bought a new bottle, which is a bit of a bigger one, and it doesn't matter which one you get. I chose the one that's most cost effective and try and keep it organic. I don't want to have too many chemicals or too many strange chemicals going into my plants because I'm going to be eating them. I like using seaweed fertilizer because it is renewable. It's a source that we're not going to run out of anytime soon, and it's not too harsh for the plants. Still, we do need to dilute it a bit more than you might expect. One thing to note about chili peppers is that they don't need as much as people might assume. They definitely don't need as much as tomatoes need. So we normally dilute it a little bit more than what the bottle suggests, and that's throughout the phases of growing your chili peppers. So I'm going to mix up some water now with some seaweed fertilizer. This is going to go into my chili peppers today. I don't do this every watering. I normally do one watering without any fertilizer and one watering with. So what I have here is just a bottle of water. It is from my water butt outside, so the water runoff from the roof. Just make sure there's no chlorine in it, because that's the problem you have with tap water. If you do have to use the tap water, make sure that you let it sit for a while, preferably in a bucket, so you can let the chlorine and any other gases or anything that's inside the water, let that evaporate, and it makes the water a bit healthier. You can also put it on a windowsill, let it get a bit of sunshine. It helps the water just re-energize. Preferably try and use water off the roof, rainwater, that sort of thing. So this is 5 liters. Now, the liquid fertilizer says to use for propagating and transplanting, or even growing on, 1 in a capful, 15 milliliters into 4.5 liters of water. So like I said, this is about 4.5 liters of water. I'm going to add a little bit less than the inner capful, so probably about half actually. Don't need any more than that. Let me just pour that in there. Another little tip when you are watering, try and get this to room temperature at least. I put it in my airing cupboard where my boiler is. I put it in there just so it warms up a bit. The water, I've just got this straight out of the water butt outside, and it is pretty cold outside, so this water is pretty chilly. Putting cold water in with your plants is not a good idea. What you'll see is they'll just wilt. So just give that a bit of a mix, and that's it really. So a little bit later we'll go in and water our plants. So the nice thing with the seaweed fertilizer, the reason I bought such a big one, is because I'm not using it only for when it's a seedling, right? This is great for your vegetable crops as well, so not just for your peppers. But throughout the growing season, I do add some of this as well. So once we get beyond the seedling phase and the plants are getting a bit bigger and we get to the point where we're going to be taking them outside, then we'll change the way that we feed them. Seaweed is still fine. You can still use the seaweed fertilizer, no problem. That can be used throughout your season if you like. You can use Miracle Grow. This one here specifically is a vegetable and fruit Miracle Grow. You need to dilute this quite heavily though. Don't follow the instructions that are on the back here. Half what they actually say on the back, because your peppers will not be very happy with too much of the nutrients that are coming through this. Remember that your soil contains so many nutrients already. In a future video we will be talking about soil and the different type of fertilizers to use in the mixes that we create. But just remember one thing, that there's a lot of nutrients already in your soil. If you've got good fertilizer, then your soil already has a lot of the nutrients to keep your plants going for a while. So typically when we replant into the bigger pots, you have probably about a month maybe of nutrients available to the plants, so you don't need to go and add anything at that point. You don't want to wait too long to start the feed, but you also don't want to do it too soon, because too many nutrients is probably worse than too few. You can always add, but you can't really take away. There are a few things you can do when creating your soil mix. So like I said, I'm not going to talk too much about the soil mix today, but there are a few additions that you can add that are going to help, and especially if you don't want to use the liquid feed like I do. Bone meal is a good one, and you also have fish blood and bone all-purpose plant food. This is also slow release. It's got a good mix of the NPK. It's quite heavy on the phosphorus, so that's pretty good for the root growth. Potassium, it's got 3%, which is pretty high as well compared to something like a seaweed. This is great to add to your soil when you are planting or when you're repotting. It's also good to top dress your plants with this, so that means just spread some on top of the plants to let it soak in over time. Because I do drip irrigation and I try and automate that whole process, I can't really use solid fertilizers too much, so what I use mainly is a liquid fertilizer, something like this. So this is a good starter one if it's the only thing that you want to buy, if you don't want to complicate things too much, then Chilli Focus is a good option. It has everything you need, not only the NPKs, but it also has a lot of extra nutrients inside there that are going to help out, so some trace minerals that your plant requires. This season I'm not going to be using Chilli Focus. I find it's a little bit expensive for what it is, and I have quite good success with just using tomato fertilizers. And that's what this is. So this is what I'm going to be using this year, organic tomato fertilizer. So if we take a look at the NPK ratios, we can see here that the ratios are really good, really angled towards the plants. The NPK ratios are really angled towards optimizing growth for not only tomatoes but also your peppers. So the NPK ratio here is 4, 1 and 6. If we look at the Chilli Focus, the ratio is 3, 1 and 4.4. So there's a lot more available here within the tomato fertilizer. Some of the nutrients that are in here, the extras that you have, the copper, there's calcium oxide, there's iron, manganese, and a few others that are in there to help the plants out. This one doesn't necessarily have as much of all that. It's quite focused on just the NPK. However, I add a lot of other amendments to my soil when I create it. Those trace minerals are already in the soil, especially with me mixing in my vermicompost. That's my worm compost that I create. So when I mix that in, it's already adding a lot of the trace minerals I need, and I think that this is going to do a great job this year. We'll see over the season how it goes, and you can follow what I'm doing and see for yourself how it works out. So one last thing we're going to talk about today is a magic ingredient, something that I find really makes a big difference. It's one of the changes I've made in the last 2-3 years, and that is introducing Epsom salts. So what is Epsom salts? There we go. So I have a big old bucket of it. It's basically magnesium sulfate, and your plants will love this. It works in a variety of ways. Throughout the season, once the plants are in the greenhouse, I make a foliar spray using the magnesium sulfate, the Epsom salts, and I use this throughout the season on the actual leaves themselves. The plants love it, they absorb it in, creates lush green leaves. Plants really thrive on it. And there's a few other ways you can use it. So Epsom salt, if we have a look in here, you see it literally looks like a salt. And you don't need a lot. Typically I will add some of this when I repot into the final pots that go out to the greenhouse. I'll add maybe a teaspoon of this to each pot, so the equivalent of that when I mix up the soil, and that helps the plants generate some great growth on the roots. It also helps them with photosynthesis. It helps them with a wide variety of things. And like I said, the foliar spray, every couple of days, maybe once a week, when I get a chance, I'll go in with this and I'll spray it down. So I use probably about a teaspoon and a half in this bottle here, which is 1.25 liters or 2 pints, and mix it up. It lasts ages. I mean, this is still from last season, so I'll probably throw that out, but it lasts a while. Your plants love it, and it's really a great amendment. So the bottom line is, if you want to do this the simplest way possible, if you want to grow your peppers and give them the best opportunity at growing those lovely big peppers and having lots and lots of fruit, then I would get tomato fertilizer. You can't go wrong with that. Just make sure that you half the dilution rate compared to what it says on the bottle, and then you're golden. But if you want to take it a step further, then consider seaweed fertilizer, and maybe consider Epsom salts. So it really depends on how you want to approach it, but the bottom line is, don't feed your plants too much. They don't need as many nutrients as you think they do. The one thing I have found is, with the spicier peppers, when you're talking about your super hots, if you want a hotter pepper, then you really want to minimize how much you're feeding them. You also want to try and stress them out a little bit. It's just something I've done in the past and I find it works. I know some people say that's nonsense, but I found that it works. So that means not giving it as much fertilizer as you do your other plants, and also not watering it until you see the leaves start to droop a little bit. So it's really up to you. Give it a go. Maybe if you have 2 super hots, do one without and one with, and do a bit of a taste test and see which one works out best for you. So I hope that was useful for you. Don't forget to subscribe so that you get alerted when I release the next video in the series. I hope you're enjoying it so far. Please leave me comments down below if you want to see more, if you need me to go more in depth into any aspect of what I'm talking about. I'm more than happy to do that. The next video I'll be doing will be about soil mixes or potting mixes, and I look forward to seeing you on that one. Until then, bye bye.